afternoon. Good afternoon. How is everyone doing? Okay. Um, so my name is Sizwe Koza from the South African Agency for Science and Technology Advancement, which is the business unit of the National Research Foundation. So the main point, well, the main mandate of SAASTA is to create public awareness in science, engineering, and technology with a view that you as the public or everyone else can benefit in terms of engaging with policymakers, engaging with scientists, in terms of which technology do you feel that would progress South Africa, or which technology or science or whatever it might be would solve our social challenges, right? So basically that's SAASTA, to create public awareness in science, engineering, and technology, right? So I'm responsible, or currently I'm responsible for the Nanotechnology Public Engagement Program, which is a program that aims to create dialogue between all stakeholders, be it the public, industry, researchers, in terms of nanotechnology, and making sure that the technology is accepted by industry, and that industry as well as the public play a critical role in the development of nanotechnology. So my presentation will be more specific, will be building human capital for the development of nanotechnology in South Africa, right, which is one of the emerging technologies in South Africa at this moment, right? So my presentation outline will look like this. I will look first at the introduction. I'm not sure if most of us here are aware or even know what is nanotechnology, so we'll go through that quite quickly. We'll look at the strategies that are driving the development of nanotechnology in South Africa. That will be followed up by two human capital programs, which are in the strategies, and those are your South African research chairs, as well as the master's program in nanoscience. And then lastly, we'll look at other HRCD programs, which are not so focused on human capital, but are very critical in terms of training your master's as well as PhD student in this field, right? So introduction, nanotechnology, what is it? What is it all about? So nanotechnology is the manipulation of matter at very, very small scales. I think most of us are aware of your bacteria, these are the bacteria, your fungi, and everyone. These are the organisms that exist at a micro level, right? But what happens if you move smaller and smaller and smaller? So what we found out is that once you take a material to very small scales, it then starts showing us different properties. You know, it changes color, it's more reactive, or it's more stronger, right? So that is what we want to do with nanotechnology. We want to manufacture devices as well as products at that level, which are much more stronger, or they react faster because we want to utilize them or want to use them in other applications, right? So this is a multidisciplinary field, meaning that it's not only, you know, work is not only being done by chemistry departments or maybe physics, but basically everyone. You'll find that your engineering departments are also involved in this type of research, chemistry guys, biomedical, right? So that's what we mean, right? So one aspect that I thought I should include there was, you know, a research that was done by Lux. So they determined that the revenue from nanotechnology-enabled products worldwide as of 2014 stood at 1.6 trillion US dollars, right? And then in 2 years' time, well, that was in 2014, and that was a significant increase, a growth of 90%. So you can see that I mean, the products that incorporate nanotechnology, they are worth, I mean, from that figure was so much in 2012, and just 2 years later, then it increased by 90%. And so that should tell you something, that there is a good space there for us as South Africa as well to make investment in nanotechnology with a view that, you know, nanotechnology-enabled products will be in the market, right? And so we will generate significant revenue from that, right? So we decided, or this DST decided, that the potential risk of actually ignoring this technology were too large. So they, in 2006, they then initiated a strategy which called the National Nanotechnology Strategy, which is the one now that drives nanotechnology development in South Africa. So as I mentioned, 2006, we launched the strategy. DST launched the strategy, and the strategy focuses on 6 areas, right? It focuses on solving our social challenges, right? Water. There's a lot of communities in South Africa that do not have clean and safe water, right? And so through water, through nano enabled membranes, we can be able now to purify water quite easily, right? We also talk about energy as well, right? Our challenges there, and ESCOM, as Dr. Masaramule has indicated. So those who would have application in fuel cell technology, where you have nano-enabled membranes as well, right? In fuel cell, and then health as well. These will mostly touch on malaria and everything, drug delivery systems, for example, where we need a carrier or sort of a nanorobot that can take medications straight to the part of the cells, ensuring that that dose is not wasted, right? So that is health, and then mining and minerals, chemical and bioprocessing, advanced material manufacturing. These would apply to your economic or industrial cluster, right? Making sure that economically South Africa is able to compete with other countries as well, right? So the vision of that strategy is to grow upon the existing strength of the NSI, our National System of Innovation, right? While at the same time addressing the need for infrastructure, as well as to create human capital or a workforce for advancing technology businesses that supports the country's future competitive and enhanced quality of life, right? So what basically that vision says, that we need to look at the existing trends. So everything that is in the system right now that we can use to develop nanotechnology, we need to make use of that, right? And at the same time, if we are going to be investing in this technology, we need to be able to buy or to have the right type of infrastructure at universities as well as science councils so that we can conduct this research, right? And lastly is to create a workforce, which I've highlighted there, right, which pertains now to the human capital side of things. So I showed you the strategy, which is this one. So later on, the DST launched the 10-year nanoscience as well as nanotechnology research plan. Basically, this research plan says this is how we are going to implement the strategy, right? So it has pillars, right? Like any other strategy, you have to have your pillars that are going to enable you to address or to actually meet the strategic goals of the strategy. So those pillars are innovation. Those are innovation centers, which are responsible for developing your commercially nano-enabled products, right? And then you have knowledge generation. So these are your centers at universities that are there to generate knowledge. You remember from Dr. Masaramule's presentation, she talks about us moving from a resource-based economy into a knowledge-driven economy. So those centers at universities are there to generate knowledge. And then I mentioned a little bit about infrastructure as well, that if we are going to conduct this sort of research, we need to enhance, or we need to now come with powerful microscopes, powerful equipments, laboratories as well. So that part or that pillar relates to that. And then responsible development, you'll see that with nanotechnology, we are working with particles that are very, very small, that you cannot see with your naked eye. So what happens if some of those nanoparticles are ingested with, in your foods or whether airborne, right? So we then talk about toxicity when it comes to nanotechnology, right? So that's looking at that, determining what level of nanoparticles in the environment become dangerous to you, right? And then the last part, which is the human capital side, which is what I am going to highlight now next. So I've chosen to focus on two programs, which is the South African Research Chairs, as well as the Master's program, right? So with the South African Research Chairs, this is again a DST initiative. It was established in 2015, 2016, right? And basically it's there to address the challenge of developing high-level research skills for the system, right? So the main goal is to strengthen and to improve research capacity and leadership at universities for producing high-quality postgraduate student. I'd just like to leave it there. So their main goal is to produce postgraduate student, and these are your honors, these are your masters, and these are your PhD students that are able to conduct research in a specific field, right? So what happens with the SAASTA chairs is that 95% of their time, the researchers as well as the chair as well, is dedicated to conducting research, right? Supervising an average of 10 masters as well as doctorate students per annum and mentoring of emerging researchers, right? So that is what they focus on. They will see that less of their time, at least 5% of their time are spent lecturing to undergraduate, because we want to make sure that we develop masters as well as PhD students that are able to conduct the type of research that we want, right? So the last point there just gives you an idea of how much DST has invested in these research chairs. So these research chairs are sort of like groups at universities, right, that are conducting research but in a specific field, right? So all in all, between this year, between 2006 to 2017, DST has awarded research chairs or research grants to the value of 1.8 billion, right, to approximately or 297 research chairs, while supporting 1,651 postgraduate students, right? So that just gives you the level, the indication in terms of the investment that DST has made in these research chairs, right? So if you come closer to nanotechnology now, these are the chairs that have been awarded. So these are the groups that are conducting research in nanotechnology. They're just focused on that. So with this group, then you have a chair, right? You'll see on your right, on your left, right? All of them processors, all leading researchers, right? You'll see the type of chair that they hold. For example, nanophotonics, right? Nanomaterials for catalysis. And there is one for medicinal chemistry and nanotechnology as well, which deals with drug delivery into specific parts of the cells. You'll see their gender, you'll see also their race as well. And quite interestingly for me was also the involvement there. You'll see that there is University of Zululand, which is the last one, as well as the University of the Western Cape, which are your previously disadvantaged or historically disadvantaged institutions as well. And it was quite interesting that now we are starting to invest in these universities, right? Making sure that there is infrastructure, that ensure that there is capacity as well, right? The last point there just give you an idea again, the type of chairs, the tire, right? So for example, tire 1, these are your chairs that are held by established researchers that are recognized internationally as leaders in their field and receive substantial international recognition for their research contribution. So it just tells you, it gives you an idea of these professors, very acknowledged in their field, international researchers, internationally recognized researchers. And this is the master's program, right? So we now have come up with a dedicated master's program. So normally you'd do your master's in physics, you'll do your master's in chemistry, right? But there's never been a master's in a specific area of nanotechnology, right? Which is a new field, a new emerging technology, which we now have. So this started in 2012, and again, it's the initiative of the DST. It is hosted by 4 universities, which is the University of Western Cape, Nelson Mandela University, Free State University, as well as University of Johannesburg, right? So I'll skip some of the things here. So the coursework, it involves 9 months, for example, of coursework at the University of Western Cape, which is followed up by 15 months at your research institution where you registered, right? That's where you complete now your research work. The admission criteria, obviously those who have postgraduate qualifications, still 60% or above. What's nice is that they offer full scholarship, registration, tuition, accommodation cost, and they also have the stipend to cover your personal cost, as well as an allowance for purchasing books and laptops as well, right? So this is, I thought I'd put this up because this is a nice picture of how this course looks like. So you'll see that there's a nanochemistry group, there is a nanobiomedical group as well as nanophysics group. And this really pertains to what I said earlier, which is the multidisciplinary nature of nanotechnology, right? So you can see that there is the emergent or the convergence there of different fields, chemistry, physics, as well as biological science. So these are the outputs, right? So between 2012 to 2016, a total of 135 students have been admitted to the program. 58 have been males, 77 females. In terms of demographics, 75% have been blacks, 21% coloreds, and 2% white students. From period of 2012 to 2017, you have 113 students that have graduated from the program, right? A further 21 will be graduating this March, April, right? So most of these postgraduate continue to do, or most of these masters graduate, they continue to do their PhD. 5 of those have then registered at international doctorate program, right? There's now a dedicated internship program, as well as placement as well in SA companies. So these are also instruments, or not really programs that are focused on human capital, but really just where you have also masters as well as PhD student. So these are your SAASTA and MinTech Nanotechnology Innovation Centers, where they develop commercially nano-enabled products. So the center has a focus on human capital development as well for the emerging nanotechnology industry, right? And then you have the summer school, which trains scientists on how to sufficiently conduct research in this field. And then you have the program there, which is the India, Brazil, and South Africa program, trilateral, which then contributes to developing expertise and skills in this technology. Thank you so much.
Very informative, perfect timing. I love your timing, just on thank you. So, ladies and gentlemen, we do have the Achiever Awards that is happening after this. So I know we are a little bit tired, stretching legs, but after the last panel discussion, especially this topic and then the last one, then we will ask you to go to, the area, the foyer, for a glass of wine. Those who are whiskey drinkers, I'm not sure if you are catered for. But yonkin sipia washa, right? So all different types of soaps do the same thing. So we will then, after the sessions, then ask you to then go for a glass of wine so that they can prepare for the awards and then come back. But we are hoping to have a very short, succinct, and successful evening as well. So with that, thank you very much, Mr. Koza. But now we're going to have Dr. Rebecca back to tell us the opportunities, particularly that are available for our TVET colleges and for students as well, which I think is very critical. So we're going to have her presentation. From there, 1 or 2 questions from the audience, and then we're going to have our last panel discussion around water. If you're Capetonian, you have to stay to hear this, because Gushubile in Cape Town, it's Shubs. And there's a lot of water supply here, so you might as well drink whilst it's still available. Liters. Okay. Sorry? You can actually sit here. Okay. Donk would like to invite you back on stage, please. So please don't leave, ne? Stay put. Just put the seat belt, and then we'll be serving you now for the cocktail evening and the Achiever Awards ceremony that we'll be having. Okay. Oh, pen. Okay, cool. There's so many. I stole 3 from there. I don't know where they went. Okay, great. Yeah, sure.
Thank you so much for the second opportunity. I'm actually presenting on behalf of Dr. Cosmas Chiteme, who was not available today. And in order to keep our carbon footprint low, because I was driving or taking an Uber, I decided to stay longer. So essentially, the previous presentation was about the green economy, but this is a focused presentation on the energy sector. So essentially, I'm going to just probably go quickly through the policy frameworks, why we should cease being a resource economy, and then opportunities for local manufacturing, and then issues around skills development, and then what we feel are potential partnerships that we're looking into now. Okay. So I'll go quickly. I think I discussed this in the previous presentation. But in terms of the resource economy, we know that we only can mine for about 40 to 60 years, in a sense. So in a sense, there's statistics around countries which are resource-based. And if you look at the statistics in the slide, essentially you have, it looks like if you continue with this mindset of a resource-based economy, you're going to have this potential shortfalls. And most of those shortfalls are around poverty, as well as ensuring that you can have high-skilled jobs. So in terms of reversing this curve for South Africa, we put in place research programs which focus around beneficiation. And in a sense, if you look at what's going on in the future, we talked about the 4.0 industry and so forth. Really, we're using smaller laptops, smaller phones, and what really runs these things are batteries. And what we have is rechargeable batteries. And I'll get into how we as South Africa are trying to really help us with how we can, as South Africa, do rechargeable batteries. In addition, in terms of transport, our transport is becoming cleaner. So almost every day you can probably drive on the road in South Africa and see possibly BMW electric vehicles, as well as fuel cell electric vehicles. And this is a big issue because, we have transport, or we have car manufacturing in South Africa, but we're currently manufacturing internal combustion engines. And many countries are now, countries as well as manufacturers like Volvo, Volkswagen, and so forth, are actually saying that post-2020, they're going to stop manufacturing internal combustion engines. The question is, South Africa, what are we going to do about that to ensure we don't lose jobs once the sector changes? And then in terms of fuel cells, I think in a sense, fuel cells as well as batteries are really towards energy security is one issue. Efficiency, you can use less energy to get a specific output, as well as looking at economic growth. Now, like I said, in South Africa, even the rest of the world, we're moving towards fuel cell vehicles as well as battery electric vehicles as options. And what we're doing in the country is we're trying to do local R&D, in order to ensure that we can really be part of the manufacturing sector. And I think just in terms of conversations I was having with the CEO of Busmark a few months ago, I remember that, in the country you can have options, right? So you can transport, or you can, Germany can send a whole entire fuel cell bus or electric vehicle to South Africa. And the only job that you'll create is the job for someone to unload the bus at the docks when it comes to the country. But the question that we're trying to reflect is, when we want to be more than just people who are, installing, just putting the components together into a bus. We want to have a deeper approach in terms of what we can add value to. And I think as we try to respond to the Industrial Revolution and so forth, R&D is necessary so we can be more than just installers or importers of complete vehicles. So in terms of where we are, like I say, since 2007, almost 2008, we've been funding research in fuel cells, in part to create knowledge that can be commercialized locally, but also in terms of the progress, the focus is on demonstrations. And I'll get into detail in future how we need TVET college graduates to be involved. And then we're shortly getting into the third phase next year, and really we're starting to sell products in the market, both locally and globally. And then also, like I say, another issue is that in South Africa, we have 80% of the manganese in this country. Now, what we're doing currently, we're just digging it out of the ground and shipping it abroad without any beneficiation. And as DST, we're looking at really supporting the new industry. And if you think about future growth, while certain technologies are reducing, the use of batteries in electronics, like in your cell phones as well as in electric vehicles, is growing exponentially over time. And the question is, how are we as South Africa going to take part of that international market? And then in terms of, this was just to show that we do have graduates, black women, at University of Limpopo and HTI. We're proud to say that we had 2 or 3 PhDs graduating last year. And this is based on some of the work that Sizwe talked about, looking at nanoparticles in the energy sector. It's something we're focusing on. And there are black women actually doing this work. And then in terms of graduates, and I think I'm proud to say that in most cases when we graduate masters and PhDs, normally 95% of those graduates work in the engineering sector or technical sector. There's a handful that fall off and maybe start working in the Department of Science and Technology. But the other 95% do actually go into industry. But one of the positives is that out of our programs, we have spin-out companies. So these are companies created by institutions to commercialize the technologies. And in some cases, we have, at the bottom, we have internships at spin-out companies that occur. And I'm proud to say last year at DST, we had an intern, Mr. Phineas Mockley, and he actually got a job at one of our spin-out companies and was headhunted before the end of the year. So I think, like I said, there's opportunities for graduates as internships in our spin-out companies. You want to work in private sector, but also in terms of the HISA program, we ensure that our graduates go into the sector. Now, in terms of, and this is the focus, I would say, one, really, as we evolve in the process, where is the role for TVET college graduates and UOTs? So the first step is technology demonstration. So this is, again, creating new knowledge. So at the first, if you look to the immediate left, or my left, essentially we need masters and PhD and postdocs when we're creating knowledge. And in some cases, you're selecting materials, so maybe platinum group metals versus titanium, that's the question, or selection. Or you're looking at how do you measure the performance of a new technology. But if you go to demonstrations, which is where we are both in the HISA program as well as the battery storage program, we're actually doing demonstrations. And at this intermediate, we'll call it intermediate step, is when we have partnerships between our master's and PhD students and our students from our Cape Peninsula University of Technology as well as other technicons in the country. Now, on an annual basis in the HISA program, I think 2 to 3 graduates, both at UWC as well as UCT, actually gain their qualification. So I know when you're at a TVET, at a UOT, you need to do that the third year for practical work, and a lot of people are getting their practical work done at our universities and so forth. And in some cases, I think over the last 3 or 4 years, we've been absorbing those students into the university to work on the technical teams, and in some cases, to work in our spin-out companies. So in a sense, our absorption is about 100% almost every year over the last 3 years. So I think, in a sense, because at the level of demonstration, that's actually what we need, partnerships between the masters and PhDs who create the knowledge, but also the university, UNT graduates to ensure that, the practicality of putting it into the field actually happens, in a sense. And like I said, the focus is on the very first installation. You want a team, reducing the cost of the installation. So hopefully by the 5th or 6th installation, cost goes down. But also in terms of another issue is around value chain analysis. So in a sense, when we have an end component or end product, there's different components that we want to be developed or at least manufactured locally. And we have close ties with, in Gauteng, with different, we call townships in Gauteng, where even the Tooling Society, Gauteng, which focuses on a township economy, we're working together to figure out what SMEs in the townships can actually do the component work for us. And last but not least, in terms of the last bit of the process is technology deployment. So at this point in time, where, again, we don't want masters and PhDs in this last area, we actually need, we need graduates from UOTs as well as TVET colleges to do installation and maintenance over time. And I'm proud to say that we had an installation about 3 years ago in Eastern Cape, and actually we have 2 TVET college graduates who are working on that project for the last 3 years, doing the ongoing maintenance and so forth. And they were able to do it with their existing degrees and so forth. Okay, so I'm just showing this talks to like the value chain from production, storage, and delivery. So even in terms of the production of hydrogen, and even the storage as well as the distribution across South Africa, this is also an opportunity for SMEs to get involved. So I just wanted to show you in terms of, like I said, in South Africa for HISA program, we go from the mineral to the catalyst to the MEA to the stack, and like I said, as well as looking at, and these are examples of technologies developed in South Africa. And like I said, we come up with the new technologies which are South African made. And like I said, in terms of the demonstrations, like I say, these are examples of hydrogen fuel cell technologies which have been deployed across the country. And like I said, I mentioned the school in Eastern Cape where we have employed TUT graduates, but also even in terms of most recently in February, we are deploying a fuel cell and training the Northwest colleagues to do the work. And in some cases, we've been in the discussions with different universities like UJ and so forth, and TUT to put in place the training programs to ensure that provincial and local municipal officials can do the maintenance and so forth. And in terms of, I'll go quickly, and let's get this last slide in terms of potential partnerships. So we've already started discussions with Department of Higher Education and Training to really discuss how do we ensure that technology development and innovation is done by your University of Technologies and TVETs to see if we can find appropriate TVET colleges to partner with to actually bring these emerging technologies to their curriculum. And also we've had discussions with Energy and Water CETA to discuss funding of TVET college graduates as well as UOT graduates in terms of their studies, but also in terms of if they want to transition to a university for future degrees, how do we transition, and how do we, most importantly, get funding for those graduates. In terms of Gauteng province and Limpopo province, we've had discussions around youth development and ensuring that between the DST and the province, we can fund students to do relevant work. And last but not least, and I think this is talking about the fact that the automobile industry is changing, and if we as South Africa continue where we're going, we're gonna, in 5 or 10 years, we're gonna find that the technologies we're manufacturing are no longer relevant. And we need to start, we've just started discussions with AIDC to discuss possibly putting in place programs to ensure that graduates coming out of the system will be able to work on new technologies, fuel cell vehicles, as well as electric vehicles coming globally and hopefully in South Africa. Oh, sorry, wrong way. Okay, so in closing, like I said, the energy sector is changing globally as well as in South Africa. In line with that, like I said, we don't want to be a resource-based economy because there are certain perils involved with that. So we're working on programs like battery programs as well as fuel cell programs to ensure that we can beneficiate our resources locally. But also I think in terms of what we're doing in South Africa, like I say, it's a platform for mineral beneficiation. Also, increasing the demand for platinum as well as manganese actually increases jobs in the mining sector. I think for every new ounce of platinum and manganese extracted, there's a certain amount of jobs created. In terms of the footprint, we signed on the COP agreement, the Paris Agreement at South Africa, so we have the pressure to reduce our greenhouse gas emissions. There's going to come a point in time when the transport sector will be under pressure to transition, and in line with that, it means your internal combustion engines will no longer be acceptable in South Africa. And in terms of meeting the demands for increased energy demand, we should know that as much as we are electrifying South Africa, there are some households in the country which will never be electrified because they're just too far from the grid. So off-grid opportunities will be important. And I know fuel cells as well as renewables play an important role in doing that. And then in terms of South Africa, like I said, we need to be resilient to the prices of the commodity market. So in terms of becoming more resilient, it's important for us to export high-value products. And then last but not least, like I said, the issue of local manufacturing and jobs for service and maintenance, and essentially the involvement of SMEs. So we see a situation where if we put in place the proper training programs as well as the transition, you can have SMEs involved, but in the value chains, but at the same time having graduates from your U of Ts and your TVETs involved in the long-term service and maintenance. And most energy technologies, as we know, normally have a lifetime span of 10 to 20 years. And that's what we're expecting to happen. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Can we just give them a round of applause just for the last time? That was a highly informative. I think this is information that we truly need. So now we're just going to have a very brief panel discussion. You have heard from both speakers. I'd like to open it to the floor to ask questions just before we invite Rand Water to proceed with their presentation. Are there any questions? I think maybe I could start. I'm very concerned about our local economies and local communities. How does DST reach rural areas? I'm talking about areas that are very far from the city, very far from urban areas. That's one. And two, how do we then conscientize schools around nanotechnology as a new development? How do we conscientize them about, I saw quite a few under the master's program and the PhD as well, fuel cells and very different things that some of us are not aware of. So if you can maybe speak to the nature of information dissemination in that regard, especially where local communities are concerned. So maybe we can start off with that. Are there any questions from the audience? This is very serious. We've got children. We've got sons and daughters that are in school. Ask questions so you can go back home and tell them, Going once, going twice. So we do have. Okay, so I see a hand, 1. Anybody else? 2 in the front. Anybody else? 3, okay. And 4, okay, fantastic. So maybe shall we take the questions, or would you like to maybe open up the floor by answering? Skills development.
Thank you for the question. In terms of reaching schools, especially when it comes to such technologies, these are, in my opinion, nanotechnology is quite a very difficult concept to convey. So it's really difficult at times to speak to learners about. But we do have programs at SAASTA, right, which we are making use of. One of those is the career profiling or the role modeling campaign. So basically what we do, as you saw, your master's as well as PhD student would then contribute back to their communities in terms of being engaged, engaging with learners. So we arrange a day where we then bring CSIR, MinTech, or even the university student who are doing their research in nanotechnology to then engage with learners. We then bring in exhibits that are easy, obviously, to understand, right? We've been doing that quite well with the fuel cell technology in terms of demonstrating that to learners, right? With nanotechnology, we've struggled a bit in terms of exhibition because it's a like I mentioned, it's a very difficult technology to convey, and
Sure.
you know, with exhibitor builders as well, exhibition builders as well. But that is the current way in which we are approaching that. This is basically to recruit masters and your PhD student, which we've done very well. Right?
Okay. Doc, do you have any input on that? Since before we receive the other questions.
I mean, normally SAASTA does all our work for us.
Okay.
I mean, they've been put in place to actually, bridge the divide between understanding and awareness around science and technology. But I think the best, I mean, from a DST point of view, we have MOUs in place with each province. So we have one in place with Eastern Cape, Northwest province, and so forth. So we go where we have MOUs in place. That's critical to us.
Sure.
But then also in terms of getting the rural areas, again, we focus on rural areas, so we've only deployed in rural area in Eastern Cape and Northwest, so we're less likely to deploy anywhere in Midrand and so forth. So that's a particular choice made. And then also in terms of knowledge, in terms of the deployment in Northwest, even Eastern Cape, the community is fully involved. So even when we have meetings, technical meetings, we always have the head of the school governing board, the principal, the regional, local community involved
Sure.
from the first step, because even if the technology works, the issue of the community taking the technology up and using it is much more of a barrier than if the technology works. So I think we ensure the community is involved from the beginning, even if they don't understand the technical work.
Okay, fantastic. Thank you. Question 1 on the floor. Okay, number 1. Oh, she's hiding behind the chair right there. She's right behind the chair. Okay, do you have the mic? Who has the mic? Okay, I think the person who has the mic must, yeah. Okay, that was so gonna be irrelevant after 2 minutes. All right, question 1.
Hello, afternoon. Yeah, I just want to check. A lot of the things that you were describing now needs young people with maths and science backgrounds. That was the last 3 speakers' basis. But a lot of our poorer communities, the young people don't even get exposure to pure maths.
Sure.
It's only maths literacy that's churning out the young people with maths. So what is the 2 panel members that's left? What are the institutions doing to get young people to pure maths when there isn't even a pure maths teacher, only a maths lit teacher?
Very critical question. I think we'll get all the questions and then you can answer collectively. The real number 1, yeah, go ahead.
No, my apologies. I wasn't in shock. Okay, I don't actually have a question. Sorry, I'm only here with you all today and I'm not going to be here tomorrow. So I just want to put something on the table that I think we need to unpack going forward. I was chatting to one of my colleagues from one of the universities and we were discussing education. And of course, the question of when does the relationship between a student or a person who enters university and the university end. And the point what I was trying to get across was that it should be a lifetime relationship. Now, most of us go to universities, we'll walk out with our degrees, some of us postgraduate degrees. But the reality is, as time goes by, you find technology changes, information changes. And the importance is that there has to be this constant relationship in terms of learning and development throughout your lifetime. And what are we doing about that? What are we doing to ensure that? Now, professional bodies unpack it as continuous professional development. But if you look at even a graduate from a university, it should not be that when the person gets their degree, that's it, I'm done, I walk out, I don't see this university again. There should always be that continuous refresher, because as you have emerging technologies, how ready are you as a graduate for that emerging technology? Thank you.
Thank you very much. The third question, question number 3. Oh, right here.
Hello?
Oh, you're just creeping. I see you. I see you. Okay. No, she's creeping in. That's number 3. She's number 4, and here's number 5. So we're fine. We're okay. Do you have the mic?
Yes, I
Yeah,
do.
so speak if you have the mic. That's what it does.
My question goes to Dr. Rebecca. I think first I will thank her for the good presentation that she gave us today.
Sure.
And we are proud of women. I think women
Yes,
are actually
absolutely.
doing it.
Yeah.
My suggestion is to ask God for more wisdom so that we can actually manage the economy. I will really appreciate the robots to come in because it gives it will give people a lot of rest and so much production, which is good. People are not spending time with their kids and they're working too much. They're overtired. They're working more hours. But if we actually put our minds and resources into robots, I think it will work.
Yo.
Thank you.
Yeah, no, I felt that. We must pray for the robots. I know in Zimalendaba. Number 4, right here in the blue dress. Right there. Yeah, not here. The hair's in the front, the there's at the back. Brother, did you pick up your hand? You can't hear me? No, he's speaking sign language. You know, unfortunately, I'm not gifted in that area, but we'll sort it out, okay? Sure. Yes, ma'am.
Thank you so much. Just to make a follow-up question, to what extent does the department work with Department of Basic Education to ensure that the quality of education that our kids get from basic education can enable them to have access to this type of skills? Secondly, I see the department is doing very well in terms of absorbing learners back to the system, but my question is, out of those that have graduated from TVET college and those with PhD qualification, how many of them has the department assisted to start their own business? Sure.
Very critical question. Number 5, right here. Number 5, right here. And then we're going to answer very quickly so we can start our last session and go to there.
No, thank you, Ma. I've been covered by all 3 previous questions, but
okay.
the one that scares me is the one to pray for the robots.
Yo.
No, that one.
Yeah. Power. Okay. So I think for now, did you have a question? Also, you were sign languaging that. All right, maybe let's come here and we'll take that as number 4, answer that, and then we wrap up the session. Please keep the question short. It's not a seminar. I see some of you are pastors, so please.
Oh, okay. Briefly, I just want to know, what is it in place as well in terms of your awareness and the campaigns that you guys are doing? Remember nowadays, everything needs to be trendy and fashionalized in order for people to actually understand it. So you can never hear a young person say that, I aspire to be a nanotechnologist or whatever, you understand? The young person is going to tell you that I want to be a soldier or police or whatever because they are aware of those things. But now, the stigma that is aligned with your profession, you understand, because it's for certain people, for a certain class that actually has these certain abilities. So what is in place that you guys are actually doing to make these professions like fashionalized and more unstigmatized as well?
That's actually a very important question because some of us are so unfashionalized in this section. But okay, no. Let me allow you to answer. We'll keep the answers short just so that we can close off the session. I'm not sure, Doc, if you want to take it or Sizwe? Okay.
Thanks for the questions. In responding to question number 1, right, in terms of now, going to your purest of the communities. So I think SAASTA has done well in terms of, targeting schools from, previously disadvantaged communities. Even in our implementation, when we are doing your procurements, we do indicate to our partners that we work with in terms of the schools that we are going for. So it's schools that are mostly from rural areas, in your Limpopo's, in your Eastern Cape, right? Because we want to give those a chance as well. So you'll see that in our implementations, there is less and less schools from your, private schools, right? Schools that you know, have the benefits of having libraries or having other, you know, laboratories, so to say. So the schools that we target mostly are schools in rural areas. We also work with what we call math, science, and technology coordinators. Those are able then to arrange for us the schools that we are going to engage with, right? And in terms of educator development, we also run educator workshops, right, with schools in Mpumalanga. We try and run away from Gauteng because most of your schools in Gauteng, you know, they are, you know, they are not so disadvantaged, right? So most of our educator development initiatives are focused on your other provinces, such as your Limpopo, Deep Northern Cape, right? So these are the things that, for example, we are doing to make sure that we target your, you know, previously disadvantaged schools as well. In terms of working with the DBE, Department of Basic Education, that's what we've been doing, your district officials as well, to make sure that we then facilitate such things as your educator workshops, right? What we've been talking about is making sure that the educator workshop as well as the learner workshop are done in a framework within that framework of the Department of Basic Education, so that instead of just doing a nanotechnology educator workshop, right, and it's a once-off thing, but rather it's an intervention that contributes to the development of an educator fully in the context or in that framework. So we know that that development is continuous and it's in line with the Department of Basic Education. So that's one of the things that we are going to be aiming to do as SAASTA. In terms of making these technologies trending, we have a few competitions. So I'm not sure if you have ever heard of FameLab. They call it the Pop Idols of Science. Basically what happens is that your researchers or your masters as well as PhD, or your honors, masters and PhD student, they are given a 3-minute slot to present on their research, and it has to be in an interactive way, in a fun way, and in a way that an ordinary person can understand. Okay. So I would, if you do find the time, please check YouTube, FameLab, and actually our representative from last year, Tiamo from Mintech, won the FameLab, the international FameLab, which was held in UK last year, right? So that was quite, for me, it was something very encouraging.
Okay. I think if you'd like more details, then definitely they are still available a little bit after. So you still are welcome to chat some more. So sorry, Sizwe, to cut you a bit short. Can we just have the doc give a brief answer as you both close, and then yeah.
Well, I'll focus on question number 4 around have we absorbed any of the PhD or TVET graduates in terms of them having companies. I mean, we have a handful of success stories, and most of those success stories were either a research project that actually went into a actual product, and more recently, Solar Turtle, which is one of the spin-out companies from Stellenbosch, they actually were one of the 5 national finalists for almost like I would say a Dragon's Den type environment. That's, if they had won, they would have gone to Europe. But they've been successful. They've worked with NetBank. But I think the challenge is that the CEO, former student, is a white male. So he comes from I would say, a privileged background. So he doesn't need a job. He can, probably get loans from his parents to go for it. And I mean, the COO is a black woman from Eastern Cape, but like I said, the CEO is a white male. So I think there are challenges, but you can get money from the Technology Innovation Agency to fund the commercialization activities of a spin-out company. And I think they have a budget about $1 billion a year to do this. In terms of needing math, what are we doing with DBE? Like I said, we are, in some cases, having impacts on the national curriculum for the new technologies. And in terms of the issue around, I would say the relationship, in a sense, like I said, relationship never ends. And like I said, our job when we produce these graduates and programs is, if possible, absorb them into the research programs. If we can't absorb them, then the second thing is to put them into industry, into companies that we have contacts with in certain industries, and last case scenario, to either reskill them for another sector. So in some cases, because we have these programs in place for a decade, you have these good networks. And like I said, our key job is to keep them in the sector and make sure that they're gainfully employed. And I mean, to my knowledge, we don't have any unemployed graduates from our programs. Again, unfortunately, those programs are at specific universities. However, we do want to put in place a more comprehensive program with DHET or DBE to actually make sure that TVET graduates in these emerging sectors have opportunities. But I'll close and say thank you so much for the opportunity. Like I said, I think I presented on what we knew, but it was probably obvious, you're probably too kind to say that we're a bit clueless as a DST as to how do we really create that bridge for TVET graduates. And we're really serious about doing that because you need to capture as much people as possible, not just those going for masters and PhDs. So I'm hoping there's colleagues in the audience that are willing to work with us to make this happen.
Sure. Sizwe, final thoughts?
Also a word of thanks from me, and also the questions around, making sure that our learners are aware of these technologies. And I think SAASTA has done a tremendous job. We now have a strategy that came into effect in 2015, the Science Engagement Strategy, which then also highlights the need to create career awareness when it comes to our younger audience. We are constantly going to schools to create that awareness on the different careers, advising them. So we hope that they will take up those careers, and then they can also be advised in terms of picking the right subjects as well, right? So I think in closing, thank you so much for the opportunity, and thank the audience as well for the questions.
Okay. Let's give it up for Mr. Khoza and Dr. Maseremule. Thank you very much. We truly appreciate your time and the information that was shared, and we look forward to engaging with your contact